So I want to welcome everyone to CASA Pitzer Speaker Series. This is our penultimate one. We have one more left after this next week. And of course, today is an auspicious day to be gathering. And my class of CASA students, we meet every Tuesday at this time. And I told them I would like us to try to decide collectively to ground ourselves in hope and faith, and rather than fear and anxiety. So that's what we're trying to do together. And we're excited to be with you all today to try to do that collectively. And I think it's so great that today of all days that we're talking about immigrant justice, because this is clearly an important political issue, as well as human rights and racial justice. And often for many of us, both a personal and political issue. So we're going to invite everyone to meet the speakers in just a second, but I just want to give you a quick introduction to CASA Pitzer, which is a program from Pitzer College that is a community-based research and community engagement program that works with local grassroots nonprofits. And we work especially with immigrant justice organizations such as the two that you're going to hear from today, and that's very exciting and blessing for us, as well as 6 other local nonprofit organizations in the IE area that are fighting for justice on a variety of topics. CASA also has a community center in downtown Ontario. Unfortunately, it's closed right now due to the quarantine, but we invite you all to come and join us there in the future. So today, our focus is on immigrant justice, as I mentioned, and I'm going to introduce our 2 speakers, which are the 2 executive directors of the 2 organizations that we work with very closely and have both. I think we've worked with both organizations since their inception, since their founding. So I'll introduce Angel first. Angel Fajaro, maybe Angel, you just want to wave and say hello. Oh, she's not, her camera's not on yet. She'll wave it. There she is. So Angel was born in Mexico, DF, and grew up in the Inland Empire. She graduated from UC Riverside in 2016 with a degree in global studies. Angel is the director of the Inland Empire Immigrant Youth Collective, which we say IEIYC. And she and the organization provide mentorship and advocacy to undocumented youth in all parts of the Inland Empire. Angel believes that empowering youth and building leaders is essential to create a community in which all people, regardless of status, ethnicity, or class, can live with dignity, grace, and power. I just want to say we've had such a joy working with Angel and with the IEIYC for many years, and the work that they're doing with young people in the IE is just phenomenal. And we also are joined by Javier Hernandez, and Javier is an immigrant and queer leader fighting for immigrant rights in the IE. He believes that justice for immigrant communities includes addressing all the intersections that are crucial to the undocumented identity, such as health, poverty, criminalization, and other disparities that keep the undocumented marginalized. He has advocated and taken direct action against anti-immigrant policies and deportations throughout the country, and has co-founded several grassroots groups. Since 2015, Javier has been the director of the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice, which we call IC4IJ, a coalition of over 40 organizations, unions, legal service providers, congregations, and more that convene to collectively advocate for immigrant justice in the IE. Through his leadership, the IC4IJ has broadened its reach in the Inland Empire by diversifying its coalition membership and increasing participation in hard-to-reach areas of the region. As some of you might know, that we have something like 27 million square miles is, I think, just one of the counties alone. These are huge places that we're in out here in San Bernardino and Riverside. Javier believes that through collective organizing, community power, the IE will be a region where justice abounds and the contributions of immigrants are acknowledged and respected. So I want you all to welcome our dear colleagues and community leaders, Angel and Javier, and we, without further ado, will let them take over and share with us their presentation. Javier, you can share your screen if you want. And
yes,
Javier,
thank you.
so everybody see.
Yeah, sorry. I had as soon as we were connecting, my Wi-Fi went out. And this is the first time it happens. And I always like, oh, my Wi-Fi went out. And I'm like, did it really, are you just trying to get out of a couple of minutes of the Zoom? But I'm like, oh my God, it went up right when we were about to start. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. I know Angel is also with us. I'm going to share my screen so I can just share. You said, okay, cool. Okay, awesome. So I'm just gonna start with, I'm gonna have to, sorry, let me just go back. All right, cool. So all right, so I get started, and Javier, the executive director of the Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice. Angel, I don't know. She'll introduce herself later on, but Angel is also joining us today. So a little bit about ICAJ. Our Tessa, sorry, are folks here part of the Pitzer and Ontario program, or yeah? Oh, yeah. Okay, so
like the majority of people here are familiar already with the CASA program and are part of it. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, well, I mean, I think if we were in a different time, right, this would probably be in person and we would have more interaction. And so, because of the pandemic, unfortunately, things have shifted and changed. But I mean, I'm still glad that we're able to connect with you all. And some students from Pitzer have continued to be interns with ICAJ and with IAYC and with the other amazing organizations here in the Inland Empire. And so that opportunity still stands. So, we're really excited about the partnership that we have with Pitzer. And so our mission, we're, as Tessa mentioned, we are an immigrant rights coalition in the Inland Empire. We convene over, at this point, it's over 50 organizations in the Inland Empire. We include Pomona and Claremont as part of the Inland Empire because, as you all know, Pomona and Claremont are LA County, but they're so far east that LA County forgets that that they even exist, right? So they just loop them into the Inland Empire. So we include Pomona and Claremont as part of the IE. So we have partners in Pomona, partners in Claremont, and then partners as far east as Coachella Valley, Mecca area, and then north, in the high desert, so like Victorville, Adelanto area, and a couple of churches that we're working with even further up in Barstow, and then some south as like Paris, right? Paris, California. So we have a big region, as Tessa mentioned, this is 27,000 square miles, that we have to reach, and we even with all the partners that we have, even with all these amazing organizations that are working that are at the table, we're still reaching we're reaching the communities around the 10, the 60, the 15 freeway, right? Like literally, that's where we are, and there's so many more communities that we have yet to reach. But we do have ways of reaching them, and that's obviously through now it's digital, but also through some of the work. And I'll talk a little bit about how we reach some of these communities that are hard to reach right in the region. I'll just get into some of the work that we do. So we do advocacy. So we do advocacy at the local, state, and national level. We also understand that at the national level, for a regional coalition, we understand that our role at the national level might not be as strong, but what we do is ensure that our national representatives hear from us, know what the values are that we share, know that what it is that we want to see in any national legislation, so that when they're moving things forward, that they ensure that that they're voting in the best interest of their constituents, right? So that's what our national advocacy. Some of the state work is through some state partners like the California Immigrant Policy Center. So we decide on three to five state priorities and bills that we want to support. So this year, because of the pandemic, the legislature actually didn't really move anything forward that was not related to COVID, right? And so we had to change all of our advocacy in a matter of weeks to really ensure that we were pushing for COVID, for advocacy work around COVID, that would actually benefit the lives of immigrants that live here in the Inland Empire. And so some of the things that we did this year that we advocated for was health for all elders, so ensuring that undocumented elders that are age 65 and over have access to healthcare regardless of immigration status. We also did work around safety net for all programs. So when the pandemic hit, millions of people lost their jobs overnight. And so that included undocumented communities. But unfortunately, undocumented communities were not able to receive unemployment, right? Because they're undocumented. And so we actually talked to the state at the very early stages and asked for a program that would support these undocumented communities, a long-term program, right? Not something short, not a band-aid, something that would actually support communities in the long run. And we got a band-aid, which was $75 million from the state of California, $50 million from private philanthropy, and they came together for 150, 125, no, $150 million. I forgot how much it was. And so what it was, um, those funds went directly to immigrant rights organizations, and all that money we could not even, all that money we didn't get money for to actually run the program. It all went directly to the hands of undocumented communities, right? Even now, we're still doing some of that distribution of those funds. We are closing up the program for us. We're closing it up in the next few weeks. But for the Inland Empire, we were able to bring in $10 million, right, for our communities here. So that was amazing. And those $10 million were distributed by or dispersed by 4 organizations throughout the region, one in the Coachella Valley, one in Southern Riverside County, so like the Paris area, one in San Bernardino, and then us here in on the west side of the region, so like Ontario area. But we were these 4 organizations were in charge of distributing $10 million, which is a lot of work. Distributing money sounds easy, and it should be easy, right? But unfortunately, because of all the red tape and all the all the things that we have to follow, all the rules, it took a long time. But but communities were able to get that support. And then some of the work that we did before, just to touch up on some of the 2019 advocacy, our biggest bill that we supported was AB 32, which actually abolishes or kicks out, I would say, private prisons in California by 2027. So this law was signed by the Governor Newsom, went into effect this year, 2020. And so private prisons have until 2027 to operate in California, and after that they must leave the state, right? And so the reason why we advocated for that bill is because here in the Inland Empire we have the largest detention center in the West Coast, and it's actually in the city of Adelanto with a capacity of 1,940 beds, and an expansion that's on hold right now that would add another 750 beds. This would actually make it the largest detention center in the country, right here in our backyard, right? About an hour from Claremont, about an hour and 15 minutes from Claremont, right, up the hill. And so it would make it the largest detention center in the country. And so obviously we're advocating against, the use of private prisons and private detention centers. Some of the other work that we've done in the past has been around street vending. So there was a bill that passed in the state legislature that allowed for food vending on sidewalks. However, even when we have these bills that I think that are drafted and passed with great intentions, unfortunately, when it comes to regions like the Inland Empire, right, like the Central Valley, the Central Coast, even San Diego area, where there's really still strong anti-immigrant sentiment, the laws don't necessarily work as they should, right? So in California, where we said, we're legalizing food vending on sidewalks, then multiple cities made it difficult because it allowed the cities and counties to come up with their own system. And the way they made it difficult was by passing rules that made it impossible to vend, right? So one of the rules that I always share, is, and this is the one that most cities adopted here in the Inland Empire, was, in order for you to vend on a sidewalk, you have to have a car that is 3 by 7 feet or 4 by 9 feet. And then it has to be mobile, so you can leave it there. So it has to be mobile. It can be, and then the best part of it was that you have to put it on the sidewalk, and you still have to leave 15 feet of sidewalk available for people to pass, because you're not supposed to block the sidewalk. So we're talking about a sidewalk that essentially has to be like 20 feet wide, right, in order for the vendors to actually be able to sell. And so the city of San Bernardino was taking action to actually enforce this really horrible policy. And so we stepped in and we stopped them from enforcing, and criminalizing vendors right now. But we're working with them to ensure that we actually pass something that actually works for the community. But part of the work is also, if you see on the right-hand side, protect our vendors and justice for Marlene was a food vendor. Sorry. Marlene was a food vendor in San Bernardino, and she was actually intentionally ran over probably about a little bit over a month now, was intentionally ran over by someone, right? So she was selling fruit in a corner. A guy turns into the street that she's at, and then stops his truck, and then just like intentionally just rams, and goes, against her car. She actually survived. She's been through a lot of health, obviously she was in a coma for a while, but she's doing a lot better, right? But what we say, and what, when we talk to our, to those in power, right, we say it's not just about how passing laws, it's about making it accessible, but it's also about the language that we use, because San Bernardino, when they were speaking against the vendors, like some of these council members, we're calling them leeches, right? They're leeching off like the actual businesses that, the brick and mortar business. They're dirty, right? They're not following the rules. They're illegal vendors. And so we're like, all those words, all that language, has effects, right? And so we want to make sure that not only are we passing good laws, we're also shifting the narrative and shifting the message, right, of our communities. So I'm gonna go forward now. I'm going to talk a little bit about our Chateauneuf campaign, which is one of the biggest campaigns that we have in the region. And it is, again, to shut down the detention center, right? One of the things that we heard right away when the pandemic started, but the first thing that, we were really concerned about folks that were detained. And our first concern was, their safety, well-being, and, what precautions were being taken to protect them from COVID, right? Because they're detained, but the workers there are not, right? The workers are coming in and out, they're in the community. So, what would happen if someone, infects someone that's detained, and then we know that when you're in prison or, detained, like, you're in small confined areas. So one of the first things that we heard from one of our leaders that was detained, we work with those folks that are in there, was that there was a spray that was being used, and that they didn't know what spray it was, but that it was causing people to get headaches. They would get nosebleeds. Their eyes would get red. Like it would, they were just really concerned. They didn't know what the chemical was, but they were concerned that it was being used, and they weren't given any protective gear, and they weren't really being told anything about that chemical. So we actually found out that the chemical was called. I'll do this one here. It was called. We found out what the chemical was. We then, we made a lot of noise. We went through Congress members, local elected officials, and Congressman Mark Takano actually wanted a hearing, right? What chemical was being used, and why was it being used? Who approved it? Who authorized the use of that chemical, et cetera. And because we were getting all this information from folks detained. This was like news, right? It was everywhere, and so these are just 3 petitions that we found online. One was directly to the White House, right? The other one was a Change.org petition, but the biggest one was also a Change.org petition, but it got 1.4 million signatures, right? Again, just saying how this chemical was being used and how people were being harmed. Through that advocacy work, there was multiple lawsuits by ACLU and different organizations, including us, on different issues, right, around the detention center. And one of the concerns, again, more was how do you social distance? How do you social distance when you're in when essentially you're in a cell with 4 different people, right? How are you socially distancing when people are coming in and out of the detention center, right? The employees, we don't know whether the employees have been following the guidelines or not. And so this is the counsel for ICE. And so there was a hearing where ICE just kept lying about their stand, that, how they were taking care of folks, what they were doing to ensure people were safe. And the judge in this case actually calls them out and calls them liars. If you can see, the court is concerned with the straight up dishonesty on part of the government's counsel, right? So a federal judge telling ICE, like, you're liars, was amazing for us, that, that, folks were listening, right? Like this agency is rogue, and they will lie, they will try to get away with whatever they can. And because of all these lies and all these lack of humanity, right, for folks detained, there was actually an outbreak in the Adelanto Detention Center. Over 100 people were sick with COVID, were diagnosed with, with COVID, tested positive. And because of that, and because of this judge, they actually released folks. Folks were released from Adelanto. This was actually 2 weeks ago. There was over I believe it was close to 300 releases that occurred. And so the judge also said in his ruling that even though this detention center has a capacity of 1,940 people, that they could not do hold more than 475 people until the pandemic was over. We don't know what's going to happen next, right? And we also don't, we know that the pandemic is a long-term thing, but this is a huge victory, right? I mean, it hasn't been shut down yet, but the fact that it has a capacity of 1,940 beds, and right now it's holding even less than 475 people, for us was a big victory. But at the same time, one of the things that happened was that at the same time that folks are being released, and COVID is, just really spreading through our communities, Black immigrants were being deported in high numbers back to their countries, right? To many African countries. And so this is something that came out, during the same time as, like, again, we're celebrating that folks are getting released, but then hundreds and hundreds of Black and African immigrants were being deported. And so, it was essentially an attack against Black communities by the administration. And so we had to show solidarity with Black communities. And so we had a national, I think it was national, days of action, against the deportation of Black immigrants, that were happening throughout the country. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. So just in case, if you want to know more about the campaign, more about the work that we do, well, I think more of the campaign, just text Adelanto to 797979, and you will be receiving updates on what's next on our campaign. I'll let Angel go, and then maybe we can do Q&A after.
Thank you, Javier. I am outside, so y'all let me know if there's too much background noise. So far, it's been really quiet. Okay. So, I'm just going to start off with a little bit about me. I just want to share who I am. I am the director for the Inland Empire Immigrant Youth Collective. I migrated here with my family. I was born in Mexico City, as mentioned by Tessa, and we migrated here when I was about 4 years old. And I was really raised in the Inland Empire. And I guess I just wanted to mention that even though I was raised here, I was still always kind of raised with my Hispanic and Mexicanness, and I'm really proud of that, right? But it was definitely difficult adapting to the culture when we came here, right? Even I just remember specifically when my first breakfast at elementary, they were giving out Pop-Tarts, and I was like, what is that? I was so scared to try it. But it was just kind of adapting to this new reality, right? And it took a while. It really did. It was definitely not easy, and it was definitely done with the support of different people in the community, specifically my family. And then just also to highlight that the hardships of being undocumented, it's definitely that, right, in the beginning, but then mostly the lack of medical access, I think I wanted to mention, because I grew up not going to the doctors. That's something that was so foreign to me. It was just more about learning how to take care of yourself and of your family at home with any kind of traditional medicines that we knew of, any kind of home remedies. And I want to bring that to attention because of what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But definitely, I think after a while, I didn't realize the difference of me being undocumented and regular folks. I kind of almost forgotten about it because I had invested myself so much into school and just to kind of being a kid, It wasn't until the transition of adulthood is coming where I really realized, oh, damn, it's not the same. Yeah, it's not the same for us. The transition of everybody's doing the cash for college, where are you going to be applying to? And I had been, so adamant about the fact that I wanted to go to college. But by this time, the the California Dream Act was not a thing, so it hadn't passed. AB 540 was, but it wasn't even like super known. Like I didn't know about it. I had to learn about it afterwards when I realized that I don't qualify for all these kinds of programs. I had to kind of like do my own research, not even the teachers or the staff in schools, even in the community colleges that I was looking at were equipped to give me advice. It was through my own research that I started even educating a lot of the counselors at my school to kind of support me through that process as much as they could anyway. And it was also like, the whole driver's license, I didn't have that. And we actually did, I'm lying, but it was right before that I didn't know that I could get it, right? It was just kind of that lack of resources. And just kind of like, it was really, really stressful, right? Because I had been investing myself in like what I wanted to do as a career, what I sought to study or where I wanted to study, and like learning like off the bat, not you have to figure it out this other way. And so it really is through my personal experience and like the experiences of my family that, throughout this entire time that drives my leadership in this community, that really drives me to continue doing this kind of work. If you can go to the next slide. So I'm gonna go ahead and move forward and talk a little bit more about IIYC now that I've given you my little spiel. So the Inland Empire Immigrant Youth Collective is a undocumented youth-led grassroots organization in the Inland Empire. It was founded in 2010. And basically we create a safe space for immigrant youth to express themselves and achieve their full potential, regardless of status, sexual orientation, and any other part of the identity that intersects with being undocumented. We focus on advocating federal, state, and local for pro-immigrant legislation to provide services and inform immigrant communities on various issues that affect their health, education, economic, and environmental safety. And I do want to highlight that it was founded in 2010 by 3 queer college students that were living in the region and were initially focused on passing the DREAM Act at the time, which was like a national thing, right? However, when the goals of the collective were shifted in 2011 when the bill didn't pass. So they kind of started mobilizing their efforts towards decriminalization of all immigrant communities and to stop detention and deportations. And also because the founders were directly experienced discrimination and limited access to resources, they took the initiative of creating their own space where they can come together and organize. And I really appreciate how they considered intersectionality because we really do have different experiences and opportunities based on our identities. And I think that was one thing that really drew me to IOIC when offered this position. And then just on the slides, you can see some older pictures. This is of the crew when they first got started, right? So you can see them, like, it looks like a backyard. That was at the first office that they had. And a lot of them are actually still involved in the fields for immigrant rights. So it's really cool to see that IIYC was kind of like a source of like all these amazing leaders that are here now, right? One of them being Javier himself. So yeah, shout out to Javier. Okay, I think we can go on to the next slide. And so the focus of IIYC is definitely, number one, youth mentoring, right? And well, I'm just gonna, youth mentoring. So we have the Undocumented Mentorship Academy. As you can see, UMA is really like, it's about a month and a half, usually a series of workshops in which we use that space to equip the leaders that are already present in the IE, because in the IE, we actually have a lot of amazing people. Like that is one of the biggest, my biggest, like, I don't know, passion and beauty about the region, I think, is the people that we have here. But within UMA is, I think, the space that we want to just support them in growing and empowering them. We use this space to support them with basic things like know your rights, presentations, social justice history in the IE, developing and empowering their story of self, and then eventually again engaging them in the current campaigns, right? But most importantly, it's a space where we can come together and heal, right? Because I think a lot of immigrant families and undocumented students kind of go through a lot of hardships. And I know maybe in the more recent years there hadn't been as much. We saw like kind of like that wave of youth that were very comfortable. And I hate to say that, right? Because they were comfortable because they had DACA. They were comfortable because they have the California Dream Act. They can have a driver's license. And so they just felt like, oh, you know, my life is good. But once that was all kind of threatened with this administration, I think it was like a call back to reality and like, look, these are just bandages. There's still so much work to be doing for something that we deserve, right? And so I think there's been a lot of attacks for our community. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that we need space to heal, to come together, to be heard, because a lot of folks are afraid to really, you know, express their, not express their feelings, but like to come out, right, as undocumented. And I think that's a big issue that not a lot of folks see. So UMA, yeah, it's really just the initial step to engaging youth in grassroots organizing and preparing them for the reality of like undocumented adulthood, right? So we do give them like guidance of like what it looks like to work with ITIN numbers, entrepreneurship, what it looks like to transfer, right, as an undocumented student. What are the steps to do there? What's different? So definitely our bread and butter, and I am very like careful about who even is part of this program, right? Because we want to make sure that we are lifting up our community. Okay, I think I'm ready for the next slide. Yeah. And then our second priority would definitely be the immigrants' rights advocacy, right? As you see, we are part of all the campaigns that was just presented by Javier. We are part of the coalition. So immigrant rights advocacy definitely, yes, up there. Number 2, I would say. But number 3 would be Undocu Health and Wellness. Specifically because this organization, its leaders and even our staff are directly impacted by unjust immigrant policies. So health and wellness is definitely our priority, right? In order to stay sane, in order to stay resilient, we are in constant attack by the political environment, and that's why there's a lot at stake. So I just want to remind you all to vote today, please. Don't forget. And especially during this pandemic, the immigrant community is overwhelmed by like health and economic disparities. As I don't know if you all are familiar, but like undocumented communities are, you know, they have no safety net to fall back on when they lose employment, which a lot have been losing, right, during this time. We're not eligible for government assistance. So, you know, like that myth and that narrative that we mooch off like whatever types of services, that's not true. We're not even eligible for most, like HealthFresh or cash assistance, nothing like that. We don't have any preventative health coverage. Like the only thing we have is emergency Medi-Cal, and that's like to say, oh, you know, they're dying, help them now. And so that's really bad right now considering the pandemic, right? We can see the disparities of who's being more heavily affected. It's the people of color. And I even want to acknowledge that we are part of the suicide prevention coalition in Riverside County. And the suicide hotline has been very busy since the pandemic started. And it all kind of makes sense in which ways. There's like waves, right? So like in the beginning, in April and March, it was being flooded by like Asian Americans. And, you know, that makes sense. And then later it was like the elders, right? Like 60 plus people were actually the ones calling the most. And then it was the community of color, specifically Black folks, who were calling. And so it's just kind of like seeing how our community is really overwhelmed by everything that is going on. We definitely want to make sure that our community is getting the care and attention that folks need, right? So we do, and even before this pandemic, we were always trying to really push out there kind of like healing circles, self-care activities, anything to kind of reduce that stigma, right? Because within a lot of the immigrant communities, I think there's stigma around mental health, and that's something that we're trying to overcome by providing like a cultural, I don't know, what you would call it, but like just to kind of bring it down to whatever, meet them where they are, I guess is what I would say. And lastly, I did want to mention we have the Undocumented Health. Normally it's a conference and or fair in which it's an annual event, right, that we host, where our intention is to connect the undocumented community with free and low cost clinics and practices about healing and, like I mentioned already, working and reducing the stigma, but most importantly, connecting them to the Health for All campaign, which is basically to achieve, to have access to full scope Medi-Cal for undocumented, or just anybody, right, regardless of status. So definitely, this is our work that we do prioritize. And yeah, if there are any questions about that later, let us know. But I think that's the end of my presentation. I'm sorry if I kind of went all over the place. I was trying to stay in time.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much. If everyone wants to give their claps or cheers or woohoo, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Javier and Angel, for that. If you want to actually stop sharing the screen for now so we can come back to each other as a group here. And if I know that some of the students have specific questions, and then if other folks do as well, we welcome the questions. So you can put them in the chat, or you can just even better, show your face and turn on your mic and ask us. So go ahead, bring with your questions now. And Javier and Angel, so much gratitude to both of you for your leadership and the beautiful way that you were able to synthesize all the many, many things you're doing in such a quick period of time. So I appreciate that. So to my students, I'll pick on you. Who wants to go first? They, by the way, they read for this week, per Angel's suggestion, the State of Immigration in the IE report from UCR that came out a few years ago. And so I was asking them to try to make sense of that and questions they still had also from that as well as anything else that they've heard about from your organizations.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that reading. Sorry if it was extra homework.
They have homework every week, so at least it was a fun one, I think. Questions, comments?
I'm typing mine. 1 second.
Okay. Anyone who doesn't want to type, you can just jump right in with your real voice. Yeah, Rosalina?
I first wanted to ask really quick, because I know Angel is from the Inland Empire. What high school did he go to?
Yeah, I went to Eisenhower.
Okay, I'm not familiar. I'm from Riverside. I went to Ramona.
Nice.
But I had a question about if there is any easy way to access the resources that you guys have, like a newsletter or something like that, because I'm in public health and I think it's awesome all the different efforts you're doing for the community, and I would love to have access to those resources, in case I need to give them out to anyone or know about health fairs you guys are having and things like that.
Yeah, our website's under construction, and it has been for a while. Just we're really capped, in our capacity. But definitely follow us on social media. I think that's where we do most of our pushes, because most of our following is there. So you can definitely follow us there, and you can also subscribe to our emailing list. You can do that by emailing. I think we had it on that last slide. I can type it in on here as well.
And Javier has given another great point about typing in recursos to 797979, and you'll get local resources. So that's a great thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and then you can also, I know we included our emails, but if you want to, if you email us to info@ic4ij, we'll include you in our listserv as well.
Laura, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Clayton's question.
Yes, thank you. So my question is for Angel. Your PowerPoint mentioned about wellness and the mental health of undocumented students. Considering the political climate that we're in and how elections are today, what would you recommend in terms of coping with just like the stress of the election and what are your recommendations in terms of coping with that, regardless of the results? Yeah.
Okay, I have to say that I'm not a professional in those terms. I don't know if Tessa has linked you all with Hala, but that'd be a perfect outlet. But in general, I think what we're looking to do is probably more closed circles, right? I think conversation and just putting that space for just pouring out your emotion, for venting, right? I think it's definitely something super helpful to kind of alleviate it. But then also finding distraction activities, I guess I would say wellness activities, right? So like I'm thinking taking a walk, just kind of disconnecting. It's definitely something that we do as staff. We take mental health days whenever we're just like on that verge, and we make sure that you just kind of disconnect and really connect with what really matters to you and what makes you happy. But in terms of like broader community, I think looking for those kinds of events, and I think we might be hosting some. I know that UCR Undocumented Student Programs is gonna have a healing, or it might be like a debrief / healing space tomorrow, and I can also probably shoot that over. But definitely that is just kind of coming together as community, and then after, and I hate to say this, but after we're done kind of taking care of ourselves as much as we could, definitely getting back down to the work, the meat of it, right? And I think that's something we're doing with ICIJ. We're also kind of just preparing for next steps of like immigrant rights movements.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that too. And I think just remembering this is just one more day in a long struggle, and it's going to continue past this day, and it's come before us, and that we have had people surviving because of hard work done on the streets, like Javier and Angel, and that's really going to continue on no matter what. I'm also going to put a couple of things, Laura, into the chat that you might follow up with, that Pitzer and other folks are sponsoring for exactly what you're talking about, a sort of support, healing, connection, and a bit of hope as a collective, or just at least support in the midst of this anxiety and fear. So I will put some things that you can look at in the chat. Clayton, did you want to share your question?
Yes, I did. I typed it in the chat, but I haven't sent it yet because I want to say it out loud, and then I can send it so that because it's kind of a two-part question. So I in reading that thing that, was it Angel who suggested it, the report from UCR? I just happenstance had been reading the two other reports on the state of work and the state of education in the Inland Empire. It talked a lot about workforce development, and then this article talked a little bit about workforce development. And I was curious what you both thought. First, I guess more generally, is workforce development / upskilling, I think is what it's called, or training, a viable method for uplifting immigrant communities, or is there work that has to happen prior to that? And then furthermore, I guess, given the unique challenges, obviously with diverse challenges within the immigrant community, but given the unique challenges that immigrants face, what does effective workforce development look like for them, I guess? And obviously, I'm sure that like you were saying, the experiences within that community are different from person to person and from identity to identity. So I understand that there's probably a lot of, yeah. Anyway, so I'll send that in the chat too.
Javier, do you maybe want to share some thoughts?
I mean, Yes, I mean, I'll try. Right, it's a really good question, Clayton. And so it's a great question. You know, it's a conversation that we've been having more recently as well on like workforce development. Especially, I mean, we're all waiting to see what happens after this election, right? We know that regardless of whoever wins, we are, you know, we're still gonna have we have a lot of work ahead of us, right? Regardless of who wins. But I think we've been really discussing this around the Adelanto Detention Center, right? When we discuss like, well, one of the things that we hear, and it's unfortunate, right? These companies go into really small towns that are struggling financially, and you know, promise, you know, we're going to get you out of this economic hardship that your city's facing, right? We're going to bring in 300 jobs, good paying jobs. We're going to give you $1 million on taxes every year, and then because we're going to hire people, you know, there's going to be $50 million that we're contributing to the economy. That's exactly the talking points that they're using right now, right? And so, I mean, that sounds pretty good, right? People are like, well, then why wouldn't we want this in our neighborhood, right? In our community. And so we've been really facing some of those questions, right, recently, because more and more this seems like a reality, right? This place will shut down, but what does it mean for the people that work there? What does it mean for the community? And so we're going to be engaging in these conversations more so as, you know, we're already the UCR, which is this, you know, the Center for Social Innovation, which already did those 3 reports that you read. We're actually going to work on a report specifically for workforce development for immigrant communities, and one specifically around Adelanto, right? So what does it mean for like Adelanto to transition from this economy that relies on incarcerating people and keeping people detained to an economy that might be like a green economy, right? There's a lot of jobs that are being created around the green economy, so wind, solar power, things like that. But at the same time, we so that's one thing, right, that we're thinking of. There's also private money coming into the high desert. There's that bullet train that will be built. It's going to be private money now. It's not going to be the publicly funded project. It's going to be money from a private company, and it's going to be a train that's going to be from Apple Valley to Vegas, right? And it's going to cost a few $1 billion. And so there's just a couple billion. And what we're saying is like, well, what does this mean for communities, right? In that community, what does it mean for the residents, right? How can they benefit from a project like this? And also, how do we ensure that immigrants, right, that the workers reflect the communities? And then we're also, working with the city. We're pitching like, well, and I know it gets a little nasty because like it's capitalism. We start like, like we start like talking about capitalism and let's make it work, right? And so one of the things was like, well, what if there's like an alternative, right? Like we know Tesla actually is trying to move into Adelanto and do like an alternative to the bullet train. Could be like I mean, they already have it planned out. I don't know if the project is there, but we'll see what happens, where it's going to be actually a tunnel, and then you get into a Tesla car, which is a self-driving car, and then it just drives you to Vegas in this tunnel underground. And it's going to be in like an hour and a half or something. So it kind of like, and it's cheaper, it's affordable, it's whatever, it's there, right? But we're also like, well, like, how do you then transition your, again, like, let's say goodbye to these prisons, right? You don't need prisons. Let's look at these new ideas, right, that are coming in. But also we know how these big corporations, they're not there for the little guy. They're not there for, for communities. They're there to make a profit. But how do we look at these? How do we take them on and say, well, if you're going to come into our community, we need a community benefits agreement, right? Which is something that's happening around Amazon, right? We know that Amazon is, this is a guy that with so much money can just buy whatever he wants, and that's what he's doing. He's essentially buying democracies and votes everywhere. And so in San Bernardino, there was a big push to get Amazon was coming into the San Bernardino airport, which has been sitting there for many years. And obviously then people get all excited because, there's jobs coming in, and the community was saying, well, you're going to be flying airplanes over, I think it was like something like 15 schools. Can, how those schools should be given funds so that they can build and fix their buildings, right? So that they can have filters, air filters. All the communities around the airport should be given money so that their homes have, they can upgrade their windows, they can get filters in their homes, things like that. And so, I mean, that's environmental issues, right, that I'm getting to. But I think the biggest thing is like ensuring that jobs that are being created actually benefit the community. And then one of the interesting things around the Adelanto Detention Center is that now, and again, this is like so interesting, they actually just unionized all their members, right? They were not union, but then now they just unionized all their employees. So now they're union members. And so us coming in and fighting them, it's like, oh, so you're anti-union, right? And it's like really trying to pit communities against each other, right? And so that we're trying, and it's like I think at the end goal, we want to see our communities thrive, but we want to ensure that our communities thrive with jobs that really uplift and not and not separate families, right? And so, yeah, but these are all, when we start thinking about these worker development programs, it becomes, I'm not an expert in that, and I think we're starting to look into that a little bit more. But we're, because of the networks that we have, we're going to be partnering up with Warehouse Workers Resource Center, which is a workers' rights organization, some of the unions as well, and then third parties like the UCR, so that it's a non-biased party that's working with us as well. But that is a good question, Clayton. Thanks.
Thank you, Javier. That was a really great answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, anyone else have another heavy hitter like that? Heavy hitting question, getting at multifaceted issues related to immigration and all these issues, topics. Anyone else want to jump in?
I guess also, Angel, do you have any thoughts, I guess, on that question? I don't want to cut.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add, and I think Javier was beginning to touch on it for the, I guess, just the warehouse aspect of it. We partner with two organizations. I don't know if y'all know CCAJ, right? So Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. Okay, I know, I should get something. Them and the Warehouse Resource Center, right? And in the beginning, CCAJ was all like, get warehouse out of the IE, like they're terrible for the environment, we don't want that kind of jobs out here. But Warehouse Resource Center was kind of putting the point of like, wait, let's talk about this, right? There's like loads of people that have employment from here, but really looking at like green warehouses and what does that look like? So I think, especially when thinking about where the warehouses are, right? They're usually closer to like schools and residential areas of folks who don't have like as much money as others, right? So like looking at, I don't know if you're all familiar with the area, but like looking at the 10 freeway and the difference of what's there than what's on the 215 freeway, right? Because it's like the higher end. So definitely, I think it would be uplifting, like working on workforce development would definitely uplift like the immigrant community in terms of like environmental justice and definitely worker justice, right? Because we want to look for different ways of like of something that like a job that is like, how would I say it? That benefits the worker and just kind of honors the worker as well, right? So I'm not the expert there either, but I know that those are like the conversations that we do have within our spaces and just kind of looking at like the bigger picture. I don't know if that added more questions or clarity.
That was great. Thank you.
It's a very complex topic too. There's no easy answers. Any other questions?
I have a comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in addition to like the environmental components that we've been talking about, like the Inland Empire like has with like some of the research that I've recently been reading, talks about how the Inland Empire has been used as a dumping ground for like private companies to put in like toxic chemicals and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting how these issues are interrelated with like immigrant communities, and it crosses borders, so to speak. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I wonder, Javier and Angel, as we like get ready to end this conversation, if you guys could give us any thoughts about going back to what this day is in the election. I mean, obviously you can't give us the remedy for how to not feel fear or anxiety, but just what you think about in terms of this election and immigration justice in general. I mean, like I said before, this work is has gone on for so long and will continue to go on. But what you would want people to be thoughtful of as voters, but also just as actors in this area, in this region, and like anything you would, your wish for folks as they leave here to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be tough. I really don't have the words. We've been discussing this with our staff, with friends, colleagues, just waiting for tonight. I think a lot of us we ignored it until like the last 5 days, and we're like, oh my god, this is coming up now. And so like today, and I think it's a little yeah, it's like, let's just try to take time, slow it down a little bit. Just, I think, spend time with your loved ones. Regardless of who wins, we have work ahead of us. Regardless of who wins, we have to still protect our communities and push whatever administration is there to actually, to really rise up to protect our families, right, and our futures. So I think that's all I tell folks. Like, this is an ongoing struggle, right, and yeah, it's an ongoing struggle, and we have to make sure that we're all okay to continue it, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next 10, 20 years, because it doesn't go away, right? Like and we have a lot of work to do. So just today, take care of yourselves, take some time to just walk, take a walk, and then just come back, see the results. And we probably won't know until like a couple of days anyways, depending on how things go. And find a place where you can find people that you can share space with, and then also space where you can volunteer your time right after, which is probably going to be needed.
I do want to just point out something from what you said, is I think we saw when Obama was elected, there was sort of like a little bit of a collective like sigh of relief, and then I think a little complacency that set in, and then we saw the deportation. I mean, Obama's record in terms of deportations and his work around immigrant justice was, we'll say, lacking, and I think that people became a little complacent, thinking that things were okay for a little while. And so I think Javier, your point is really great. It's like, really, no matter who wins, we have to really stay vigilant about how we advocate for this issue. I want to hear Angel's last words. I'm just going to also just say quickly that I'm posting into the chat a number of resources that have been shared with me. This is going back to Laura's question about like, how can we support ourselves in this moment, and also some past recordings from the talks that we've had on justice that will inspire you, hopefully support you. Angel, you get the last word.
I really don't have, just echoing what Javier was saying, right? It's a long fight. It's definitely not just election dependent on the election. And I think I would just advise to really pay attention to things that stay. So like propositions, really looking into that and how that affects the communities and in which ways. And I can tell you, sometimes they word them really confusing, right? So really looking into into those and reaching out. As I know it's already by today, but like reaching out if you have any questions regarding them to your trusted organizations. And yeah, just I think that's it, right? Just kind of also focusing on the other things that are at stake, local elections as well, because as Javier mentioned, like with other campaigns like the street vendors, like if we have the right people in place, we can get things moving as well. So not only focusing on presidential, right? Local is definitely where it's at.
And I want to just say, because I know that they won't, but Angel and Javier both are working with amazing organizations that are also like super grassroots and could use your support. So if you want to give like some really direct way, like how can I do something? These are great places to donate to. They're great places to donate your time to donate your vote towards. So I would follow them. Jessica put in everybody's websites and you can find them in social media, follow them. There's always great information that comes about how to be involved. So I just want to say that. Thank you so much, to both of you. And thank you for the incredible work. Oh yes, Angel, thank you for saying that. There's a fundraiser in December for IEIYC. So follow that link to their website, or even better yet, go get them on Instagram and Facebook and whatever else. And thank you so much, IEIYC and ICIJ, and Angel and Javier in particular, for your incredible work.